All right, what do you see when you scroll down your feed right now? For some, it's another video of a traffic stop gone wrong. No blue lights flashing, raised voices, an encounter that escalates far too quickly. For others, it's a headline about an officer ambushed while responding to a call, leaving behind a family, a badge draped in black. August 2025 has been no different. Protests have sparked in one city, memorials in another, hashtags trending on both sides of the aisle. It feels like the divide between law enforcement and community is growing wider, louder, and more exhausting with every news cycle. And the truth is, it's not just about headlines, it's about lived experience because for some, the badge represents safety, service, and sacrifice. And for others, it's a reminder of trauma, profiling, or power gone unchecked. But here's where things get complicated: perception versus reality. The way something feels to me may not match the reality of what's happening on the ground. And the way it looks from the outside often misses the nuance of what's happening inside the patrol car or inside the neighborhood where those sirens echo. So today, we're not here to take sides. We're here to sit in the tension, peel back the labels, and start listening. Because if we don't, the gap only gets bigger, the stereotypes get sharper, and the hope for healing fades further. Let's walk into this conversation with open ears, open hearts, and maybe, just maybe, a willingness to change the narrative. This is the Conviction Fiction. And now for a quick commercial break. If you are ready to transform your life today, No Turning Back, The Journey Home and the Work Within is more than just a book. It's a roadmap for redemption, resilience, and rebuilding. In this deeply personal and powerful narrative, I share my journey from incarceration to empowerment, and I kind of weave together stories of struggle, growth, and transformation with a little help from my friends. With raw honesty and a message of hope, this book is a must read for anyone seeking to break free from the past, embrace second chances, and build a better future. So, if you are ready to turn the page on your story, No Turning Back will inspire you to confront your challenges, embrace your potential, and take that first step toward change. Get your copy today and start your own journey toward healing and transformation. All right, now, so most times, let's just be honest. When we picture law enforcement, the first thing that comes to mind is usually the uniform, the badge, the patrol car, handcuffs, guns, a taser. But what if we stripped all that away? What if we sat across from the person wearing it and asked, why did you sign up for this? What keeps you here? Or even when the job breaks you down, what keeps you going? Now, we've seen all the stories of officers from rookies still fresh out the academy to 20-year veterans who've seen just about everything from pages to body cam. And their stories, they're not just sound bites for TV. These are raw human reflections if we were to listen to them. I've heard I had I've heard a friend of mine. We were ended up on the same baseball team. We were coaching the team. And his kid played for the baseball team. My kid played, and I found out he was an officer. And the first thing he told me is that people think that we're robots in uniform. But I go home every day to my 7-year-old son. He said that he was scared sometimes, not just for his life on the street, but for what his wife might think of him when she sees the news. Because we often forget that behind the badge is a human being navigating pressures most of us never face. Split second decisions that could mean life or death. Policies that shift with every election cycle happen all the time. Mental health battles quietly fought after seeing tragedy day in and day out. I was at a conference on last week where it's mental health, and the woman that was speaking was a mental health professional for the local city government. And she said that the most traumatized people are the first responders. The first responders, the firefighters, the nurses, the paramedics, because they see trauma more often than the average person. Now, from the conviction fiction, most of us has seen trauma because we've been, incarcerated or locked up or been around some really difficult scenarios. But first responders see this every day. Right? Maybe the baby that was thrown in a garbage can, left to die, or someone that's been shot and they're bleeding from the neck or something like that. Daily, they see this kind of stuff daily. Wherein said that in this is the stat she gave me. She said that uh, those professionals, those first responders, might see 50 to 70 really trauma induced scenarios in a year, when the average person will only see like maybe 4 or 5 in their entire life. Right. But these people have to get up and go to work every day. Now, for the Conviction Fiction podcast members and our loyal listeners, I know you guys have seen trauma before. Um, Maybe not 50 to 70 per year, but it's close. That number's up there. Um, and the mental health battles quietly fall after seeing you're a first responder or one of those people in that field. Um, they admit that, they go to therapy, but really only the spouse might know what's going on because mental health is still whispered about like it's a weakness. And then there's training. The public often assumes that officers get months of de escalation and cultural awareness drilled into them, when we know in reality, many police academies are more dedicated to firearm training and taser training than to community relations. Now, several officers that I've seen through reports have admitted that this imbalance actually frustrates them too, because they want to learn how to communicate better, but they're not set up to train for the worst case scenario, not the everyday encounter. They're set up for worst case scenarios, not just everyday encounters. So it's one painful reality that there is danger out there. Last month, 3 officers were killed nationwide in ambush attacks. Yet, in the same breath, officers will acknowledge that the way that policing is done now, especially in marginalized communities, it sometimes makes the neighbors feel like suspects instead of citizens. And that contradiction kind of weighs on them too, because beyond the badge, these officers wanted one thing. They wanted to be seen as more than just enforcers. They wanted to be seen as neighbors, as flawed humans doing a nearly impossible job, often with limited tools or training. Now, that doesn't erase mistakes or justify abuses, but it does remind us that the badge isn't the whole story. It's just the surface. Now, let's talk about on the community side, right? Because that's what this show is about. We're actually bridging the rift between law enforcement and the community. Now, so if beyond the badge is about the officer's reality, then voices from the street is about the community's truth. And those truths are layered, painful, and powerful. I've been in communities, and we all probably know a grandmother who remembers like the civil rights era, or a high school senior trying to navigate daily stop and frisk encounters on yesterday or to this day. Or we know a young father who once did time himself and now worries what lessons his son learns when the police roll by. Now, these stories echo what many of you listening already know. Trust is very fragile. Um, I was at the same conference last week, and one woman told me about the first time she called 911 for help with domestic violence, only to be interrogated like she was a suspect. It's like something that you could never believe. Like the pain that she was encountering from the domestic violence, because I guess the guy had left, or they had gotten into an argument, and the guy had left, and now she was there talking to the police, and the police were interrogating her like she was the suspect, like she was the one that committed the violence. Ever since then, she said she wasn't going to call for help at all. On the other hand, um, we know small business owners how they sometimes recognize that an officer's consistent presence, checking in on the block, not to harass but just connect, changed the entire atmosphere of the street that he was on. If the police know your name, he know your kids' names, he show up at the cookouts. When things went down, they pretty much trusted him to handle it. Now, this duality is the heartbeat of community sentiment. For every story of compassion, there's a story of fear. And for every good officer, remember, there's a memory of one who abused his power or her power. And for many, especially in the Black and brown communities, the weight of history, let's be honest, it amplifies every interaction. When you hear about grandfathers being beaten marching for civil rights, or your cousin who was wrongfully arrested last year, it's not paranoia, it's generational memory. Now, the community normally asks for three things, and this any community goes across um, races, it goes across economic status, over and over again. The community will ask for three things, and that's trust, accountability, and fairness. We want to trust that when they call for help, communities won't be judged first. Um, Communities want accountability because when things go wrong, apologies without action don't heal wounds. And more so, communities want fairness, that laws will be enforced with consistency, not depending on who you are, or where you live, or what you look like. Okay. So, with that being said, those voices are very clear. People aren't asking for perfection, they're just asking for dignity. And that's what this show is about, to challenge those narratives where we see both sides of the story. We want to be treated like human beings before suspects, right? Communities want officers to remember that the streets see everything: the tone of your voice, the body language that you have, the respect or lack of respect in every single interaction that you have, right? All of that is noted. Now, there is common ground. We have to have common ground, but before we get to common ground, we got to have the dialogue. Someone has to talk about it. What would happen if we put these two worlds in the same room? Officers behind the badge and the voices from the street. I can imagine that at first you probably feel tension. You got arms crossed, eyes guarded, words measured, people trying to say the right things. But slowly something can shift. In structured dialogue sessions like the ones I attended um, last week, both sides were asked to share, not debate, but simply share. Officers would talk about the fear of pulling over a car at night, never knowing what's waiting on the other side of that window. Community members responded with fear of being that car, hands on the wheel, praying every movement doesn't get misinterpreted, like I'm reaching for something. And then suddenly both sides realized they were describing the same thing. It was fear, different angles, but the same emotion. Now, there was one powerful moment in this conference that I participated in that came when a young man described losing his brother in a police shooting. He looked the officer in the eye and asked, like, do you understand what it's like to bury someone because of a badge? Now, the room, of course, felt silent. Then the officer, voice shaking, he seemed like he was nervous, admitted that he once held a partner dying in his arms after an ambush. Now, uh, this dialogue between, it wasn't between the guy who lost his brother and the officer that shot him, but it was just a regular officer. And this regular officer said, "Yeah, I can imagine, but I also seen my partner die in my arms." Now both men ended up, being emotional. And at that moment, just for a minute, um, it became a bridge instead of a wall. The dialogues that can be had reveal actionable insights too. For instance, communities often want officers to show up before tragedy, to attend school, to mentor kids, and be present in non-crisis moments. I've always said, like, we and I'm not, this is not no knock on the police, right? Because I know some of them are thrown into real life situations where they are asked to be the hero. But for the most part, police are called after the crime, right? After something has happened, that's when the police are called. Now, of course, in this day and age, and it's always been like this, sometimes they are called and thrown in a line of fire, so to speak. Um, but communities want officers, from what I've gathered through my research, they want officers to show up before something happens, to be present, right? Not in an intimidating way, but as partners within the community. And that goes into another debate as far as officers that often don't live in the community, but police the community. But we'll talk about that on another episode. Um, Now, from the officers' view, this is what they said. They said they wanted to have community leaders to advocate for more training resources and mental health support within the department. So basically, they wanted the tax dollars to go to more training resources, not more guns, and more mental health support, not more drones and robots, but more to support their mental health and with their soft skills when it comes to dealing with the community. Now, both agree that the current us versus them narrative really doesn't help anybody. Finding common ground doesn't mean agreeing on everything, right? I'm not here to propose that we agree with all of the officers or that the officers should agree with the community. It just means that we want to build enough respect to disagree without dehumanizing. It means creating some type of space for hard truths and shared humanity to coexist. Officers have a job. Simple, right? Simple. What is it? It's to serve and protect. And in these sessions, like many that are being held across the country for the first time in a long time, people weren't just talking at each other, they were listening. They were actually listening. All right. So, um, moving forward, right? Where do we go from here? We pull back the curtain on both sides. We've heard both the pain, the fear, and the desire for something better from both sides. Now it's time to move from talk to action. The good news is change is already happening in cities like Camden, up in New Jersey. Community policing models have reduced both crime rates and complaints against officers. In Dallas, programs pairing officers with mental health professionals are transforming how crises are handled. And in smaller towns across America, Coffee with a Cop initiative have sparked conversations that never would have happened on the street corner. Right. So we need to get these initiatives pushed across, especially with um, our government really 2025, as you know, the government is really cracking down. People fear martial law. People fear that the leaders are actually making it tougher for communities to put a soul to the badge, right? Um, Recently, government officials have started to raid homes, raid places of business, in an effort to curb immigration. But here's the truth, guys: programs don't work without people, and that's where you come in. If you're a community member, show up at town halls, not just protests. Go to the town hall, volunteer with local groups that are working to bridge the gap. Um, No, it may be taboo, but invite officers into spaces where they can learn the community stories beyond statistics. Now, if you're in law enforcement, advocate please for more training. We know that you guys need it. You need more mental health support. You need more transparency, more humanity in the workplace. Push back against the silence when something isn't right. I know it's kind of hard and difficult for you guys to do, but if we're going to change the narrative, we are going to have to do the uncomfortable. For all of us, it starts small, just a conversation, a question, a willingness to see the human being in front of us, whether you're an officer looking at a human or if you are a citizen looking at an officer. It's still a human being. We can't afford to wait for the next tragedy to bring us to the table because the table is here right now. And that conviction fiction, we believe that narratives change when people are willing to change them. It takes a little bit of courage and a lot more fortitude. So let's start writing this new narrative one story at a time. One where basically safety and justice aren't competing values, but shared goals. If this episode resonated with you, just don't nod along and say, "Oh, that was pretty cool, Antoine." No, act. Join the conversation in your city. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear the other side. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because your voice helps amplify the dialogue that could change a life, a community, maybe even a nation. That's the conviction fiction for today. Have a great one.